Okay, we're going to play a game. Someone suggested, I forget, somebody came up and whispered in my ear, but they suggested we do one event before the main event. Who has lived in Topanga the longest in this room? Okay, so here's how we're going to do it. Who lived in Topanga in the last century? Raise your hands. Sounds great, doesn't it? Who lived in Topanga in the 80s? Oh, that's still too easy. 70s? 60s? Whoa. 50s?
Wow.
40s? 40s. Okay. 49. 48. You got someone in 20. Okay. Let's go to the 30s. How come someone's raising their hand and it's not even 30? Someone's got a magic formula. In the 20s. Wow. All right. We have a winner. Can you stand up? And the year would be 1920.
27, yeah.
27 or 25, somewhere in there. Wow, wonderful. Thank you. Now we're going to go the other way, of course. How many of you don't even live in the canyon? Okay, well, you're all winners, because you have yet to move here. But who's lived here less than a year? Less than 2 years. You raised your hand for the 1920s. Okay. What was in the lunch? 3 years. 4 years. 5 years. 4 years. 3 years. 4 years. Okay, stand up. Let's welcome these people. Okay, yes?
Alan wants to know how many people raise their kids on goat's milk.
But this is the last one. Pearl tells me Jean May is going to be, should I say someone's age like that?
Yes.
96 next week. Wow, that's 30-something. Okay, other chat and news. I don't know the name of the house, but Mark Friendship's house, does it have a name? No one could tell me. It ought to have one. We should name it if it doesn't.
I can't come up with the name of the family who lived there, but we could just call it the Mark Friendship House.
The Mark Friendship House, up on North Topanga Canyon, just shy of Entrado, was been bought by Mark Friendship, completely renovated. And the realtors had an open house, and somehow I think that the 500 people I saw go through there weren't all serious buyers. But just amazing, restored to, like, frozen in time in 1931, was it?
I think so, in the early 30s. It was.
Original 1930s Spanish hacienda.
The appliances, they had one of the earliest dishwashers, like it was brand new out of the box. And they had this little door in the kitchen that opened and an iron would come out. Sort of like early Jetsons or something, I don't know. And incredible Malibu tiles. I'm told that even one of the little clusters is worth $30,000 or $40,000.
Where approximately is the house?
Well, you know where Pat's is. If you keep going past Pat's, it's on that side of the street.
Carla has a good.
Pat's Grill.
Oh, okay.
Between the two Pat's.
Excuse me, sir.
Across from the old corral.
Okay.
Where that bend in the road is.
Is it for sale?
It's for sale. It's $3.4 million. The dishwashers with it.
The address is 2083 North Topanga Canyon Boulevard, and it's listed for $3,350,000.
Now, Mark has very kindly offered that if we wanted to, we might be able to get a historical society visit there. It's difficult all around, but how many people, not with goodwill, but how many of you would actually guarantee that you would go and tour this house if we put it on? That's a lot. Okay, now put your hands down. Now, how many of you are lying? Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do. But you'll have to be a member, not to be on the tour, but to get informed, because we'll send a notice out mostly to our membership. So join with Kathy or Bill. Other news and chatty stuff. After I forget how many years, we finally had our first meeting on the actual fundraising and production of the Topanga Story 2, or whatever it's going to be named. We've got to get that thing a name.
New edition.
The new edition, okay. And so that's really exciting. We're still trying to decide on things like type size and paper and all the fun stuff, but it's coming, so keep that in mind. It's huge. I mean, we're arguing over that, but I've heard estimates as high as 600 pages. So it's, and we're trying to dress it up, see if we can do it, print it in 4-color, whatever. But we've got to balance that. We don't want it to be so expensive that you'd have to live in Mark Friendship's house to be able to afford it. Today, we have the story of a Lower Topanga house. And I don't think I need to really introduce Susan Chasen to this group, because we all know and love her. But I guess I won't, but I'll let her introduce her own story and get going, since I used up too much time. So with no more ado, I give you our own local and famous Susan Chasen.
Yes, it's fine. I think it's fine. It's fine? Well,
Can you hear her?
No.
is it on?
You have to talk into Try to, pretty close.
Okay, I'm talking.
Can you hear
Okay.
her?
Yeah, it's really loud. I can tell that. Well, you all had a chance to see Thais Sykes, who stood up, because this is really sort of her story. And she's contributed all these really fantastic photographs to the Topanga Historical Society. She's here tonight with her husband, Jack Sykes, who grew up on, or for a lot of his childhood, he was actually living on Topanga Beach in the probably late 20s, 30s. And their daughter, Lori, artist, who did all the scanning of these photos. So I'm really grateful to them for doing this. And I guess I'll just start right in. This is a picture here on the left of Thais when she was young. And on the right is the house that she lived in, originally on the Topanga Lagoon. She moved there in 1927. She was born in Santa Monica, and sorry. Okay. Anyways, but ultimately the house was moved when the area was filled in for the Roosevelt Highway. And so the photo on the right is how the house being moved up the Canyon Road almost to where it stands today as a historic resource owned by state parks as part of the Lower Topanga acquisition. But the great thing about the house is that, it's a pretty simple house in a way, but everything about her story and the buildings from that time period, everything's getting reused and saved. Today, probably no one would move a house they would just tear it down. And so it really sort of a special house to me to think about that it goes so far back onto the Lagoon community. Also, I should change the slide, I guess, at some point. One more thing. Her family, the Rusts, her mother and father were Ina and Clayton Rust. There were about 24 Rusts and other relatives that were down there running businesses and living on the creek. And so her family really is kind of I think of as almost a founding family of that whole area. This is a picture of a fisherman who lived next door to Thais. This is Thais here on the right. And the great thing about talking to her is that when you say, when she tells you the story, you say, do you have a picture of that? And she just has a picture of everything. It's so great. This lobster that you see on the left, this gigantic lobster, the fisherman, John Van Dukas, their neighbor, gave to her to carry home to her mother. And when she was about this age, so he taught her how to hold it. And when she got home, her mother just started shouting at John and shouting at her to drop it. And but you know, little children have a way of really following directions so well. So she made it through that hurdle. Okay. And this is a great picture of the lagoon. John Van Dukas apparently made a living just in a rowboat fishing in the lagoon. This is another nice old picture of the lagoon, I guess at a low tide time. Theis's house would have been just a little off screen to the right, I guess. And this is the old bridge. The road, the coast road used to just go in really far at Topanga, just sort of down deep, pretty deep into that area and then come back up. I think the road is Old Malibu Road. And it comes out sort of around Wiley's now. That road is still there, but the bridge isn't there anymore. Is that right, John? Someone? Okay. Here's another picture of the lagoon. And this one you can see, well, you can see the house. You see the two windows in the back? So that's where the house was. It's a little higher, but yeah. And this is the service station that Theis's father, Clayton Rust, opened. Okay, I'm forgetting to say everything. Just a minute.
That's where Oasis.
So does everyone recognize the site?
Yeah, we're Oasis.
What?
We're Oasis.
Yeah, basically, it's exactly the same knoll that's there today. And I believe that some of the slab, maybe it's in a later slide, you can sort of see the slab. This looks like there's some kind of drilling or digging to put in the gas station. I don't know for sure. And yeah, I don't know for sure whether that means that people would get gouged if they went too far away from town in their cars. Because it doesn't seem like city prices would be a great advantage today, but maybe even still is. In this one, so the station just sort of grows a little bit each year. I mean, each slide. And this one you can see on the top, it mentions the Elkhorn Camp. but I think that actually washed away. I mean, I think it was destroyed and rebuilt is what Thais was telling me, because that sign wasn't there before, and the timing seems to be after it was already destroyed. Anyways, on the left there's this building. These buildings seem to just sort of come and go, and these slides on them. But I think this one on the left, try to remember it, because later there's a restaurant that looks like a totally different kind of thing, but I think you can still see a little of the side of this building in that restaurant. This Zero Lean truck is cool because Zero Lean meant that it was, it flowed at 0 degrees or something. But it also, these trucks were specially modified the way, I think maybe the way they do biodiesel today, so that they had gasifiers and they could use the Zero Lean to actually power the trucks, these delivery trucks. I should say something about Clayton, her dad. He came out from Oklahoma. His family was originally from England. They came to Massachusetts. His dad was a traveling preacher, and they went to Oklahoma, and then sometime, probably in the teens, he made his way to California. And Thais doesn't know exactly how he did get here. She doesn't think it was by horse, and he did spend some time at the Grand Canyon doing mule tours. But once he got here, he worked at the Orcutt Ranch and did some surveying of Topanga Canyon Boulevard, and probably learned about the area from that. And so, yeah. And a lot of different gases sold here. Oh, and this is the slide that shows the arrival of the garage. And yeah. What's that?
Was that power pole behind there?
You know, it's funny because I think it's the same power pole that's still there today. Is there a way of going backwards?
Yeah, there's an arrow.
Left arrow?
What arrow?
You want to go back to the slide?
Mm-hmm. Do I have to get the whole thing up? Oh, it poses it. Okay. Let's go back and see. No power pole. Oh, oops.
Just go to the far
Stop that. There. And then, okay. Here it is again. I think the more cluttery the picture, the more it looks like a real thing.
You know what corner that is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oasis.
yeah.
What?
It's right there at the entrance to Topanga Canyon on where the feed bins.
But is it the north or the south corner?
It's the
Where Oasis
north
is.
west. It's the
It's
feed
where
bin
the
side.
Feed bin side, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have
That's where they
said.
put the flag during the 93 fire for the choppers.
That's the knoll that you see all the time there. It's this, you know, it's the same. What?
Batteries.
It's a battery brand. There's also some Gilmore thing that looks Gilmore oil or something. And this, so Clayton had the gas station, and then when they were doing all the work on the Roosevelt Highway and Topanga Canyon too, probably, Ina, Thais' mother on the left, opened a little barbecue restaurant right next door. East side refers to a kind of beer. And she was a great cook. And there was another little restaurant there too, but she was more the hot food and dinners sort of thing too. And was a really good cook. And
Next to the gas station?
yeah, you'll see some pictures in a little bit. They'll show you them together. like here. So you see, the restaurant is just next to the gas station. Also, if you go a little further from the restaurant, a little to the right, you see the little sort of brown square-looking building. That's a building that I believe ultimately ended up on top of the feed bin. I'll show you in a later slide.
Yeah.
Here are some people that worked with Ina at the restaurant. On the left is Nan Smith, who was Irish. She came here with her mother and her brother. Her brother was a fire watcher in Topanga, and she worked in the restaurant. And on the right, the furthest person on the right is actually Clayton's cousin Cleo Windle. And the Windles lived on Brookside, on the far side of the creek. Brookside being that, probably most of you have seen that road. It's a little ways up from the coast. So this building became part of the feed bin. This in the front here, I think it's Ina. Is that Ina, Thais? It's not? That's her sister. Okay, there's a nice mistake. Which sister? Which sister?
Mary.
Mary. That's Mary Kay's then, right? Anyways, the building there, if you look at the feed bin, this was the top floor was the office of the Los Angeles Athletic Club representative, and down below was like a fire station. And I spoke to Marty Morhart, the owner of the feed bin, and he says that those doors, the sliding doors that you see at the bottom, for many years were behind his place, just sort of lying there, rotting because they changed the front of it. And but I think that looks, just from the various slides, the top part looks a lot like that little building. Well, it looks exactly like it. And here you can sort of see, unfortunately, there's that tarp. But the angle is, it's a little different because there were cars in the way, but you can see that it's sort of the same. Well, the same. And this is Guy Wade, the athletic club representative, and his wife. They had a vacation home on Brookside Drive and were real good friends of the Rusts. He would go on fishing vacations with Clayton. And here on the right is a store that Theis's aunt and uncle originally owned. This was Blanche and Roy Rust. And it later became, I think, it became the Potter's Trading Post and was moved over and became the other part of the Malibu feed bin. So, on the left, you can see the same building was actually originally a two-story building, and Thais remembers going into the upper floor because that's where her aunt and uncle lived. But a landslide eventually took that out, and it was sort of, I guess, maybe rebuilt a little or something. And the place was sold to the Potters, Eleanor and Charlie Potter. Charlie, yeah, and her aunt and uncle moved to Oxnard and opened a very similar place there. And so now you can see that, if you look at the roof, you can sort of see that it looks like the same place. But now it's on the north side of the street, and then later it became the part of the feed bin. Also, that phone booth was the only phone around. Theis's family got a phone in 1941, And so if they ever needed one, they used this one before then, that is. Okay? See, here's the other restaurant that was down there, the Step Inn. And if you look at the side of it through the gas station, I wonder if it's that old building that we were looking at before, because it has that other kind of wood on it. Yes? I think so. Really? That's very cool. I wish I could have seen it in those days, because the gas station also stayed for a really long time. This Lucy Loggins owned the Step Inn, and she eventually sold it to the Terrells and left her dog with Thais, their beloved dog Queenie, a collie. And that's her little boy who probably just got to go ride his pony up and down the beach with nobody caring and having a great time. And the house, I just learned this, but 'cause I had this slide labeled Mystery House or Mystery Building until just a couple days ago. I was describing it to Thais, and she said that her parents actually lived in the little house at the bottom that's dark, and at the top it's light. It's the same building, but they lived in it before she was born, before moving to Santa Monica for a little while, and then coming back and opening the gas station. And this is a view from the back. I'm going to take just a minute. This is a ranch. You can see Topanga Boulevard off to the right, or Topanga Road probably at that time. And this ranch belonged to Thais' grandfather, as you can see. But it's really hard to picture this, I think, with what exists today. The road on the left was reached by what would be today the Rodeo Grounds Road. Drive down the Rodeo Grounds Road, make a right onto this road before the creek. Is that right? And this road actually linked all the way up to Brookside Drive, and around at that point it crossed the creek with Brookside, sort of merged. And here's another picture of it. He lived there, I think also till they started to fill in the area, and moved to Canoga Park. He lived actually with the Rusts also for a little while. And then houses were built on the fill. So there's houses along Topanga Canyon Boulevard at that point weren't there then, couldn't be there then. And on the left, the older woman in the front is Thais' grandmother. Great-grandmother, right. And the kind of bizarre thing about Sarah Elizabeth Davis Penland is that she lived in a cave in the Santa Susana Pass for quite a few years with her children and Thais' mother, because Thais' mother died when she was really a young child, and her dad, who's also pictured there, couldn't really raise all four young daughters, so the two youngest ones went to live with the grandmother, who apparently lived in a cave, and we just, that's as much as we know, pretty much. It was very primitive. This picture is taken sometime after she moved away from the cave, though. And this is a birthday party. So I'm sort of going back now to life on the, well, actually, I don't even know what's going to come next, actually. But this is a picture taken in the Lagoon area. Actually, you can't see her house, but it's right next to her house because it's at her birthday party. And Thais is there, the third from the right on the bottom row. And her best friend and cousin, Marilyn Case, is in the second row, the second from the right. They were just like sisters. They lived together down here in the Lagoon area, and then later when the house was moved up to closer to Brookside, the Kays lived on Brookside. Here's an old picture of the Lagoon where you can see the house really clearly next to the cabins that we all know today as the Ranch Motel. And here's this. Here's Thais and her cousin, and a family shot. The I guess you can just read them. Maybe I don't have to tell everything. Okay. So you can even see her house in this one if you look carefully. It's just, you know, the little square-looking shape of the cabins. It's just a little bit sort of to the side of the back of that. And now it's time for the house to be moved up the road. And it's just a little north of Brookside. Here's that famous postcard that you've seen of the Cooper's camp, and you can see their house there on the far right. The house was moved one morning when Thais was sent off to school. They were putting it on a truck. It was the Star Moving Company, and then when she came home from school, it was it may have been like this, or it was in its new location. The man in the picture there is her father. They, took out the beams one by one to lower it into position. And here it is in its new position, and there's frost in the creek there. And this is one of the strange things about these old photos is how just the land seems to have changed, because in this case the creek is a lot lower than it is today. Now it's almost level with the house, it seems. And this is these are pictures taken at the house after it was moved. Let me just catch up here for a second.
Is the house still there?
It is. Yeah. Let's see. Thais' mother was a really great gardener, and for some time while the house was there, they hadn't actually completed the top floor. When they first bought the house, they bought it from someone who couldn't, he was a builder and he couldn't afford to finish it. So part of it wasn't finished. And so it was really nice in the upstairs area because it was one big open space, and they had relatives would come over and they make quilts, beautiful quilts, and the kids could play up there. And let's see, they had a tiny freezer. I don't know when they would have gotten that. Or was it a freezer or refrigerator? Freezer? Just big enough for like 2 boxes of frozen vegetables. But it seems like they spent a lot of time outside too. And well, at that time, Thais was always still going to the beach and playing in the creek. And let's see. Here's an example of their gatherings. They were always having barbecues there and having everyone over. And here's, on the right, Thais has her first bicycle she ever got. And she only had it for a few months because she would ride it down, I guess, to the school bus stop and leave it in the garage. And after just a couple of months, the garage burnt down. So that was the bike. Let's see. This is, are they in the right order? This is the garden that they made, and at the top of the steps there, there's like tile that says Rust. And it looks so different today. This was kind of a little bit tasteless of me, but this is Ethel and Fred Clark on a boat ride to Catalina. But when Thais was still living in the Lagoon area, as a pretty young girl, like 7 or so, she and her cousin Marilyn discovered Ethel dead under the steps to her house. And somehow those shoes just looked so much the same to me. That, here's, I think it's Cleo and Fred Wendell's house. Is that right? I think it's throughout your grandfather's house? Because I got 2 different IDs on this one. The back of it said one thing and the other said the other. Anyways, this may be at her grandfather's ranch instead of at the Wendell's house. Family gathering again. Let's see. If this had been the Wendell's house, I would tell you that it burnt down at a certain point. When Thais went to school at Jefferson Elementary and then Madison for, I don't know whether that's junior, which Madison, then Lincoln, then Santa Monica High School. When she was at Madison, I guess it was 1938, and there was a huge fire, and they could see the fire from school. And her uncle came and got her, well, actually they went and waited at Santa Monica High School, and the uncle came and brought them home, and it was really sad because her dad was there fighting the fire and saving her house. But unfortunately, the uncle's house burnt down. 2 of her uncle's houses, uncles and aunts' houses, burnt down in that fire. And Thais' father saved theirs by repeatedly filling up buckets in the fish pond and climbing up to into the house and out the window and pouring buckets of water on the roof and just doing that over and over again. And I think Thais' bedroom was a little bit burnt. on the top floor, but otherwise the house was saved. And Red Cross helped rebuild one of her cousin's house, Mary and Carl Kays, who lived on Brookside. Here they are, again, a little later, family gathering on the beach. Thais is there, you can see her on the right. And this is a view of the beach, of all the beach houses just south of Topanga. There was a thing called the Plunge, and the building there that has the sort of fronds hanging off of it is actually an indoor swimming pool. It's really hard to picture, but it is. And at some point in Thais' childhood on the beach, she met a younger little boy who lived on Malibu. Was it called Old Malibu Road then, too? Old Malibu Road? Which you could almost, I wonder if does it take off from about right there at the very top of this picture? Old Malibu Road? Jack?
Does it what?
Can you see, does that road start about right there? Further? Well, anyways, there was a road that went down off of the Coast Road, and there were houses down there, and Jack Sykes' house was just 3 houses down from the lagoon, or up, yeah, away from the lagoon. And he was they met at some point, but it wasn't until many years later that they would meet and get married. Here is this. I had these little cards, but since there's no number on the slides, I don't know which was which. Well, this is getting to be the war years, and Thais volunteered to do, watching for airplanes. There was a place that people would do that just across from where the Getty is today. And she also was very good friends with Bob Talmadge, whose car that is. And here's some of the kids that hung out at the beach. I don't know if I spelled Seagrass right. And yeah, that's that. Here is Jack Sykes' family, his sister Beverly and his father and his brother David. David was a big surfer. Jack was younger, wasn't as much into surfing. He was into climbing around and walking as far as he could on the fences with his friends. And but he was a very popular little boy, and very early on showed a tendency to like older women. And in this case, well, when he was really small, about 5 or so, he would take walks with Greta Garbo, who had a place there, I guess. And she thought he was very cute. And also Shirley Temple was on the beach. And when he cut himself really badly, his dad thought he needed stitches. And so Shirley Temple happened to be coming by and said she needed a lift into Santa Monica. So she came with them, and he sat on her lap on the way to the hospital to get stitches. And then, let's see. Actually, I wish I could go back easily. I forgot what you did. These were some other neighbors. The woman on the far right is Bob Talmadge's mother. Bob Talmadge is Buster Keaton's son, and Natalie Talmadge was, in the end, she was a confirmed alcoholic apparently, but she was, the Talmadge girls, or the Talmadge sisters, were the basis for the story Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in the movie. And her mother had the philosophy that was the basis of one of the characters there. She's the original stage mother, and her philosophy was get the money and then get comfortable. And she had a huge mansion on the beach that had originally belonged to Johnny Weissmuller. And it burnt down in 1943, and the people who came out of the neighboring houses to, worried about their own houses were Bing Crosby and Paulette Goddard. And here's a picture of another neighbor, Jack Haynes. This is at Thais' house. Thais said that everybody was constantly repairing their cars. Everybody knew how to do everything to them, and they were just doing it wherever they were. Jack Haynes went on to be, it seems like kind of a war hero. He got a lot of medals and distinguished flying crosses and gold stars and stuff. And he was the first fighter pilot to land in, oops, I can't remember the name of the place in Korea. Maybe I can read the fine print. Incheon, what is it? Kimpo? Kimpo, yeah, right. Near Seoul, right. And but he was, unfortunately, it's sort of a tragic story because he lost a real good friend in the war and never really got over it. He married a beautiful New York model, and it didn't do the trick. And he ultimately committed suicide. And his brother also he had two brothers. One of them was pictured in that group shot before. Which was the one married to Darylyn Zanuck? Bobby Jacks. Yeah. And
He was the director of the Waltons for 12 years.
cool. Did you hear that? He was the director of the Waldens for 12 years.
And then committed suicide.
Oh,
You knew
yes.
that?
Yeah, he also committed suicide. And this is the other tragic story. A close playmate of Thais and Marilyn's was Audie Carrillo's daughter. She was the niece of Leo Carrillo. Audie, her parents lived on Brookside Drive, and she was their only child, and she died in this car crash. When she was younger, they would have adventures together. Thais and Marilyn and Ida were once out swimming, and they got caught in a riptide. They were always at the beach in the water, and they got caught in a riptide that took them all the way to about Sunset Boulevard from Topanga. And Audie was pretty frantic and he had sort of influence and called the Santa Monica lifeguards that didn't normally come to that area, and they were rescued. But according to Thais, it really wasn't that scary. It was kind of fun. They just sort of floated out there and waited for help. But here they are, Thais and Jack, visiting the house lately. And unfortunately, since it's been owned by state parks, this is a little worse than it is right now because they did at some point pick up some of the garbage. But it's been broken into and bad things have happened, and the newspaper that Thais is holding was from just a few days before we were there, if not one, it may have been the day or the day before, and it had burn marks on it to suggest it was burned a little. So that's a little worrying, because it would be really great if this could be preserved as a nice historic resource. Maybe it could be part of the Historical Society, home to exhibitions or something. So it would be great if state parks could hear from people who, to support, restoring it or at least preserving it so it doesn't get destroyed until there's money enough to do something more. Okay, now, some music, a musical interlude. Oh, I should tell you what the music is. Wait, you want to put it on? Yeah. After Thais left, moved away in about 1944. Yeah, the first track, yeah. Anyways, she moved away in about 1944, and then no one really knows who lived in the house for about the next 20 years. Oh wait, don't turn it on yet. Hold on. Can you turn it off for a second? I just have to say who they are. So, the only thing we know about that person, or persons, but there was that she tripped over her dog going to get the mail and couldn't live there anymore. So the house was available again in 1964. And George and Katie Wood moved in there. It was, they found the place, they wanted to move away from the valley where it was really smoggy. And they were folk singers. And it was Katie Wood who gave me Thais' phone number, and when I was doing a story for The Messenger. And they have some really funny folk songs.
And that old so-and-so of a boss that I'll e'er see no more. My wife and daughter Jo and my mother-in-law I placed on the decks for a nap. And just to make sure that all was secure, I built them a lead-weighted raft. Along came a gale in which a boat could not sail, so I launched my ship on the sea. I stayed on the shore and I waved in semaphore, then I laughed till my sides split in three. The boat took a lunge as it soaked up like a sponge, then it sank like a rock going down. I watched from the shore till the bubbles were no more, then I skipped all the way back to town. Word was passed along as the others heard my song, then ships like mine were soon desired by all. To great wealth I did ascend, selling ships to every friend, helping them in all their matters marital.
Well, can I skip over to maybe number 8? It would be 8. Yeah. This next one is a really kind of funny, makes you feel nostalgic for the Cold War. He did funny and then really sort of serious and poignant songs. I'm just going to play these two funny ones. What? Oh. Can you tell what track?
The Flight of Caroline. Caroline Kennedy sat in a rocking chair, rocking away one day. She rocked so hard and she rocked so fast, the rocking chair flew away. Oh dear, see here, I didn't know chairs could fly. What would my father say about this if he saw me up here in the sky? But on she whirled around the world, a-rockin' to and fro. John Glenn flew by and said, oh my, I guess that my orbit's too low. He said to her, I seem to concur, you're flying much faster than I. She said, have hope, catch my jumping rope and I'll pull you along in the sky. He'd no sooner gone than who came along? Nikolai Epapovich, that's who. They said, hello, your father we know, but miss, I don't think we know you. She said, my name is Caroline, and this is my father's chair. They said, quite neat is your rocking chair seat, but Russia has bigger ones there. Then off from afar approached the Telstar, the one that relays TV. So under the moon she watched a cartoon, all furnished by AT&T. When she got home, all tired from her roam, and told of her flight up there, no one would believe, could even conceive of a little girl flying a chair. But was it all a childish dream, a flight of fanciness, or did she high in a rocking chair fly? If it's Caroline, I would say yes.
Well, I hope they seemed funny. The first time I listened to them, I couldn't quite tell, but yeah, that'll have to be it. And here's the album cover they released. The album they released. And let's see, they were both at USC. He was in the opera program, and she was in musical ed, and they met in a choir. And so they moved to Topanga, to the house, on the creek, and just really loved it for many years until they were relocated by state parks. They did actually buy the house for $14,000. And in the 1970s, they paid $40 a month to rent the land. But then in the 70s, there was the athletic club decided everyone had to either move their house or basically forfeit it to them. So at that point, Lego assumed ownership. And here they are dressed as folk singers. On the right, North, they had two children, April and North. April was 12 when they moved there, and North was, I can't remember, younger. And he became a violinist. I think he lives in Eagle Rock now. And April became a ballet dancer. And she was dancer in Switzerland, and she would send home articles of news of Topanga, news of Topanga fires, and in German language papers. Here's Katie has a real philosophy about the kids playing in the creek and how great it is. How she says that the creek was constantly changing. It would change where it was in relationship to the house, and it was just so infinite. She says you just learned so many minute things and so many gigantic things while you were there. She said that while they lived there, they loved the danger. Even though the house was high up, when there was a big flood, they'd all just gather in the front room and just listen to it raging by. And she had a lot of wild pets, that were orphaned for one reason or another. She had a pair of woodpeckers that she raised, and they would actually follow her. There was a neighbor that an elderly neighbor that she would go to help out, and they would fly down with her and wait for her and then fly back. And this little squirrel lived in their drawer for a while until it was able to go out on its own, I guess. This is actually a mistake. It's April and someone, I don't know who that is. And here's George. He was the writer of all those songs, and then Katie did the harmonies. The person on the left, Lulu Angeles, was a resident down there until the relocation also. And is this the picture from when your parents visited, when your mom visited? Okay, that's what I thought. So this is from about 1980 when Thais' mother and two of her cousins visited the house again and met George and Katie. And then some years later, Thais and Jack went to visit as well. And here's George and Katie with their daughter April at their mobile home in Ventura, where they moved to. And I think it's late, so I'm stopping, and I want to give Pablo Capra a chance to do a short little set of slides of the very last days of more or less the rodeo grounds. But there's so much I didn't tell. So I hope it was still enough. And here's Pablo.
All right, I'm working on a project. We're working on these projects together, and I'm trying to hold my own of kind of more of the artists community, and this is kind of like a preview of that. So I guess I called it Idlers of the Bamboo Grove because that was the part of it that I was a part of. I grew up in the rodeo grounds. That's me in the middle, and those are my parents, and that's my brother. He was born in '81, so it's the early '80s. And most of these pictures I have are recent. I haven't been so good about compiling pictures, but I've been doing a lot of oral histories of the art scene down there. On the left, that drawing was the cover of the Idlers of the Bamboo Grove book, which was a little anthology of 10 Lower Topanga poets. And I'm going to talk about a couple books. They're on this table over here if you want to look at them afterwards. And also, there's some flyers there for an art show. We're going to have me and two of the other artists. This guy on the bottom right, actually he did them both. James Mathers, that's his artwork. He also calls himself Toilet. That's what the signature is about at the bottom. But I've always just been, I was really fortunate. I feel fortunate to have grown up in this neighborhood that was really kind of free and fun and I like that painting that he did. I think his glitter painting about, it just kind of reminds me of the attitude in that neighborhood to make it, you know, that I don't know, the freedom of it, the freedom of expression, and what I like about it. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but on to the next one. This is James Mathers in the top right. That's his studio, which belonged to Michael Green, a painter before him. When I have some interviews with Michael Green, but I don't have any pictures of him and his stuff. But Michael Green was relocated when the state parks took over, and James Mathers kept it going there in the art studio for several more years, and was kind of like the new godfather of a little art scene in the last years down there. That's him and his girlfriend doing some kind of performance with using cows as guns. And these are some other painters. The other really important painter from an earlier time in Lower Topanga was this guy on the left, Norton Wisdom. He kind of developed this method of painting to live music, kind of making the painting a performance art. And he lived down there. He moved in there in the 70s and was a real big influence on all the artists, including me, who lived there since. And he kind of took James Mathers under his wing at a very early age and helped James to become an artist. And on the right is a painter named Smile. He's from Belgium, and this is something he was working on in that same art studio you saw. He didn't live down there, but he often came down there to work and paint and hang out. And that's something else I'm trying to focus on in my project, is that I like how this neighborhood supported kind of community and a place of gathering, and I think you can see that too in the older pictures that Susan was showing you. These are some other artists, mostly from the idlers of the Bamboo Grove. Top left is Daisy McCracken, who's one of the poets in the book. That was from a reading that we did at Beyond Baroque. And on the right is the jazz trumpeter David Hayward, and he's a poet as well. And on the bottom left is Robert Campbell, who was a poet in the book. And on the bottom right is Beretta, who was not a poet, but who wrote another book about Lower Topanga called Rat Tales. And it takes place in this little shed that you see there. And he's working on another more historical memoir of his life down there. He's been living there since the 70s. This is the sculptor John Baptiste, who has been working down there since the 90s up until the very last days, doing these carving creek rocks into tribal heads and making those kind of weird lava lamps like sculptures and flowers. And you can see that house there belonged to Michael Green, the artist from the rodeo grounds who built that studio and was there before them, but since he left, they boarded it up, and everything just kept going on around it for several years. It was kind of strange. In the middle of this was a boarded up house. And it's just kind of a hanging out scene. Kind of reminds me of some of those pictures you saw in Susan's slideshow. Just became very social, or was very social, and surfing was a part of it. Those are the kids. The kid at the top right is Calvin. He grew up in the neighborhood, and behind him is my sister, who grew up in the neighborhood. And then because the neighborhood was being relocated by the state parks, I put a different kind of spin on the art scene. This is some work that was produced because of dealing with, having to leave this place. It's James Mathers' painting of being cast out of the rodeo grounds on the left. And on the right is a painting of Norton Wisdom with his house on his mind. This was some graffiti that appeared in the last days there in the rodeo grounds. And this was about it in the rodeo grounds in the last week that was taken. But when I grew up there, this was like a community of like 150 people, so it would be good to show you 2 pictures, but I don't have the group shot from the first. So I'm working on trying to bring this artist community into clearer focus, and that's the end.
I want to thank you all for coming and staying for the whole thing, and I loved it. Let's give both Susan and Pablo a big hand.